No, I never.
To feel like you're safer.
Looking at some of the
address
is my cousin.
Airport. Cases of fishes.
She is right there. Were you sitting there when I was walking around?
We're a close family.
Would you please not tell my mom that I totally... What the?
Just me. No, I won't.
Actually, she's got her hat kind of pulled down.
Yeah,
She's
that's
trying to hide
I
it.
think you were, hi cousin Judy, how you doing? Everything good with...
Oh, yes.
Yeah. It's been about a year now, right?
Well, I did this one this year, I did that one last year.
Great.
This one, I got the okay yesterday.
We're not on camera yet. I might get in trouble for this, but I have to say, my cousin Judy, I think we're cousins. I know you're cousins with my
Well,
mother.
your mother and I are first cousins. I don't know what that
You
is.
said you could.
That's
Yes,
right.
You said.
You're my
Judy
second.
has 10 children.
It's a conversation starter, I prefer.
Yes. Yeah. People say to me, wow, you have 7 kids. That's a lot. I'm like, junior varsity compared to some of the cousins. Well, with that being said, and hopefully she won't tell my mother that I embarrassed her on that too. There's nothing to be embarrassed about. She's proud of me, right? Okay, well, it is 5:30. Karen, are we ready?
Yep.
Because we're going to be on camera too. Okay, well, welcome everybody to the January 12th Town of Webster workshop. We have 3 agenda items tonight on the workshop. But first, we have a public hearing that was previously advertised in the Webster Herald and on our town website and social media platforms. So I am going to open that public hearing, and we have several people in the audience tonight that I think are signed up to take the podium to talk about this. But first we're going to have Matt Chatfield, the Executive Director of the Webster Economic Development Alliance, give a little presentation on Restore New York Communities Initiative, which is essentially the topic of this public hearing. So I'm going to open the public hearing and hand it to Matt.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Again, my name is Matt Chatfield. I am the Executive Director of the Webster Economic Development Alliance. Big mouthful of words. It's our local development corporation where we conduct economic development across the town of Village of Webster. So we are the entity that facilitates obtaining grant funds and making initiatives happen in the community. So this is just another area of push and focus with the West Webster Hamlet. So tonight, the presentation actually has 2 main parts. The first part I'm going to actually breeze through relatively quickly. It's already been covered, but it's largely describes the grant program itself, and then we're going to kind of get into the application. So the Restore New York Communities Program provides financial assistance only to municipalities. So it's actually, we use it as a pass-through. So municipalities can apply for the funds, and they can either conduct rehabilitation projects themselves if they own the property, or they can actually enter into a contract with a private property owner, whereby the private property owner would conduct that rehabilitation project and then get reimbursed upon completion. But the monies would flow from the state to the town and then to the private entity. So mixed-use commercial projects, residential projects as well. The project we're contemplating is all commercial. There are no residential components contemplated. Eligibility: buildings need to be vacant, abandoned, condemned, surplus. And we can do a whole host of things with that, including demolish buildings. rehabilitate them. You could potentially, if you had a historic building, you could knock it down and reconstruct it. That's the contemplated project for this application is to rehabilitate the structures that are being identified. Projects need to be architecturally consistent both with the municipality's zoning and comprehensive plan, but also within the context of the neighborhood. The hope is that whatever is completed will fit in and blend well with the neighborhood. This is not eligible for municipal buildings themselves, so it's not as if the town could apply for this funding and use it to rehab this structure or the library. Right? It needs to be for non-municipally controlled, non-municipally used buildings. And the goal is to revitalize urban centers. And for a significant period of time, now the West Webster Hamlet has been a focus of continued revitalization. The town was awarded about $100,000 last year, currently conducting a master planning effort for the hamlet. And this is one of multiple projects that are sort of happening simultaneously as we try to facilitate revitalization within the hamlet itself. But one thing that we do need to point out is that projects need to be in economically distressed communities. And one of the things that we're both blessed and cursed, right? Webster we're a strong and stable community, relatively affluent. But when it comes to applying for economic development funds, sometimes that puts us in a disadvantaged position. So the town has actually applied, or is actually conducting an income survey of a small segment of the hamlet area itself, in hopes that we can identify potentially what I think many people would believe as we proceed is an area that's economically disadvantaged. And we're trying to understand exactly what that means and what that could mean for us, and that as far as applying for additional grant funding for other programs, including this one. Funding limits, the town of Webster would be eligible to apply for up to $2 million for this project. Our application will be for slightly less. A whole host of public documents that are going to be required. I got a mountain of paperwork for every parcel, and we also need to hold this public hearing, as well as have multiple resolutions. In addition, we have to do a financial analysis for each property to sort of justify why should the public sector get involved at all? Why can't the private sector make this work on its own? And we need to show from a financial analysis perspective that there's a gap. And without this public assistance, you can't bridge the gap. So it's part of the reason why we conduct the application. And there's a fee. Municipality has to write, if you're going to end up writing a check for about $1,000, Mr. Supervisor. Luckily, it's not out of your pocket. So, and then there's a commitment fee. But the scoring for the application itself, economic distress is a high scoring component. If we're in a brownfield opportunity area, which we're not, if we're in another investment zone, we're not. And then, of course, program goals, inducing commercial investment, and project readiness feasibility. So we do our best to place our application in the best light possible to score as high as we can. SHPO, we need to go through the process to ensure that the project wouldn't run afoul of any of the State Historic Preservation Office's goals, and as well as the State Environmental Quality Review Act, to make sure that we're complying with the merits of the secret program. And the application is due in 2 weeks. We've been working intently for the past 3 months on this. We're right down to the deadline, but we feel we have a decent application here. We're going to give it our best shot. So the West Webster Hamlet Revitalization Project. So we're going to talk about the buildings in more detail. I think we all know that the Webster Furniture Strippers building, we all know where that one is. I think everybody in the room is here either because of that building or one across the street. There's been years of effort on this particular building, dating back to 2017 when we also applied for Restore New York funding. Actually, at that time it was to demolish that building. But this time our goal is to rehabilitate it. In addition to 600 Ridge Road, the Furniture Strippers building, the former G Palace, is being proposed opposed to our project. The former Firemen's Association building at 603 Ridge Road. And initially we had outreach with the owners of properties across the street on Gravel. We're having just a mixed level of interest from those property owners to participate. But we do have, for sure, we have 3 solid properties, 600, 602, and 603, all flanking the intersection, all of which, a massive amount of investment would give a real shot in the arm to the hamlet, and we think could start to spur, some real great things happening in that part of the community. We need to publicly promote and advertise which sites we're talking about. We have 5 different sites that were on our notice of intent to apply, which is kind of like a precursor. Those 5 properties include 600, 602, 603 Ridge Road, 1041 and 1043 Gravel, and they all bolster that Four Corners intersection. So the Furniture Strippers building, it's an abandoned building. It has some environmental constraints associated with it, and we have a multi-part rehabilitation revitalization scenario that we're contemplating. It's hard to fathom that we could be talking about numbers that are this large, but when you start adding it all up, the building rehabilitation component is less than 50% of the actual overall project cost. So there are demolition site, there's some asbestos and lead abatement that would need to be conducted, there's soft costs, everything. These costs include everything from architects to attorneys to contingencies, investigations, fees, permits, basically soup to nuts, what it would cost for a private entity to undertake this sort of project. We anticipated restoring your request for that. It's about $522,000. And there's actually been quite a bit of work to date that the town has done, even just to get to the point where we are today. At the bottom of the slide, I already did mention the income survey. The results of that, we're anticipating the results of that here in probably within the next, hopefully by the end of this week. We don't have much time left. But that's literally where a consultant is hired, conducts a survey, and in addition to mailing the survey out or I'm not sure if they didn't do an email, but they mailed it out, and then they're following up with door to door. They're literally door knocking and trying to conduct a survey to understand what the level of income is within the general area. There was a structural assessment done on that property. There's been some environmental assessments already completed. In the process of being completed, it's still almost finalized, but not finalized. This is just securing the infrastructure. So the community has invested already close to $40,000 in trying to identify how do we solve this problem. So this is merely a down payment of public assistance to bring this project and this property back to life and reactivate it. The goal is that this is the only down payment of Webster town taxpayer dollars. Hopefully we can get the rest of it from others. Moving on, Jade Palace, former Jade Palace. What was the former? What was it called? What was the other? What was it
Heritage
before?
House.
Heritage House, right? Yeah. So there's been food, a tavern, some sort of hospitality services on this corner since 1873, maybe earlier. It even predates this building, when the prior building actually burned down and this one was constructed. The vision of the owner is to rehab the building in its entirety for a restaurant use. That is the intended goal. As you can see, we got about $1.25 million in investment for the rehab of the building, but then we're talking about the site work, potential asbestos abatement inside this building, soft costs, contingencies. About a $2.3 million effort. We will be applying for $880,000 to help assist in that. Former Firemen's Association building across the street, currently vacant. The second floor has actually always been vacant. They never actually finish the second floor because of egress issues. So there is no second form of egress from the second floor, therefore it can't be occupied, other than there's a little kitchenette up there. But for the most part, the second floor of that building is something that remains vacant. So the goal of this project is to provide a second floor, a second primary ingress stairway up to the second floor, such that the floor can be finished and then rented out as part of future use of the building, most likely office. $199, basically $200,000 request for that project. And then the last for the two projects, we've identified some conceptual costs associated with potentially rehabbing these buildings, although to date we haven't really had much interest from the property owners specifically to participate. Maybe we'll turn around. We did exchange some emails recently. Kind of hopeful that they'll maybe find more interest in participating, but if they don't, then they will not be included in the build out. So that's 5 and 6, or 4 and 5, excuse me. So the total investment for those first 3 properties, the total investment we're projecting in the community is about $3.4 million, of which we're going to hopefully provide an incentive of state funds to the tune of about $1.61 million as part of our application. And that is below the $2 million cap that we are removing. I will open up for questions.
Thanks, Matt. And, well, I think also, and Aaron might be able to know this, I don't know, your presentation is on the town website and social media platform now.
No, because we didn't get it till 5, it'll be
Gotcha,
on after
yeah.
meetings.
And that's,
Admittedly, I was late. And
don't worry about it.
too.
That, just want to let people know, the audience and at home, probably within 24 hours, what Matt just went over will be on the website or social media platform, so you can review it at your own leisure. So Matt, I'll tell you what, before we get into questions from the board members about this, since it is a public hearing, we are now going to switch over to people in attendance who may or may not want to take the podium to talk about this, ask questions. And we're going to go right in order of how they signed in. So my old neighbor, Joe. All right. He goes first.
So, Mr. Supervisor, members of the town board and others.
And Joe, I apologize. You have to give your name and address first.
Okay, I'm coming to that. My name is Joe Kozelski. My wife Linda and I live at 300 Marina View Lane in Webster, which is part of the Cove development. So I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I wish to talk about a hidden gem right in plain sight. As I said, we live in Hillsborough Cove. As such, we drive along Ridge Road frequently, as do our neighbors. Every time I drive along this section of the road, I marvel at how unique it is that the ridge is elevated relative to the basic ground level on each side by 10 or 15 feet. I don't know, possibly more. I've mentioned this to some of my neighbors who also travel this road, and they said they'd never noticed that they were driving along the bridge. I thought that's pretty remarkable. It should be noted that it's highly unusual for a town or a settlement not to be situated along a stream or a river or some other type of waterfront. But Webster owes its existence to this ridge, of which at least some people are not even aware. And probably few realize this was the reason why Webster came to exist. Yet the town of Webster, along with the towns of Ontario, Williamson, and Sodas, owe their very existence to the ridge that runs through these communities, all which developed along Ridge Road. Originally, as I'm sure most people know, it was a gaming trail, then a dirt road, then a federal highway, I should say it was an Indian trail in there too, and now most of Ridge Road is a state road. That it is unseen by many people could be in part because the town has developed more and more, as the town has developed, more and more of it has become obliterated, as we have seen in recently the opening of one of my favorite stores, which is the new Country Max store, adjacent to the Creek Edge Farm Market. As the town continues to develop, it's possible that more and more of the ridge will be lost or not highly visible. The Webster furniture strippers and the J Palace buildings are both situated right on the ridge and serve as a focal point of this section of the ridge. Some people, me included, feel it's desirable that both of them be preserved, and there have been many uses suggested. The town has asked for ideas pertaining to this area. Now, my thoughts aren't entirely in line with the presentation that we heard earlier, but they're not inconsistent with it either. We feel that this section of the road represents many historical stages in the development of Webster in general, and in particular, West Webster. There are several architectural types of structures representative of the different periods of the development along the ridge. The Webster Furniture Strippers building is, in my mind, a classical colonial or Greek revival structure, most likely dating back to the early 1800s. The J Palace, I've read, is stated as being from 1883. There are many front gable side wing structures along the section of the road from the 1850s and the 1860s, including the Webster House picture framing building, which may be one of the very first structures along the stretch of the road. There are newer structures up to and including some more modern ranch homes situated on the ridge as well. Incidentally, there are several, maybe 11, as many as 11 Revolutionary War veterans interred in the cemetery at the corner of Ridge and Maple Drive. There is at least one-room schoolhouse. That's district number 3, by the way, and also a Sears and Roebuck's house along that stretch of the road. These buildings and all that stretch from Empire Boulevard to Bay Road would not exist if it were not for the ridge. Yet, as I said, the ridge goes unrecognized. This section of Ridge Road is truly unique, and I would suggest that the town of Webster strive to preserve and celebrate the ridge. I've written a couple of letters to the Webster Herald about that. If it were to be designated as an historical preservation district, it would likely turn into a very desirable section to live.
Hey, Joe, this is the least favorite part of my job.
Time's up.
5 minutes and 40 seconds. I gave
Okay,
him some
all right.
extra because he's my neighbor.
Okay.
And
I'm listening to you.
are you almost done?
Very close to the end.
Okay.
I'm sorry I've gone so long.
That's okay.
I can envision some ways in which such a project could be approached. The town of Webster should take advantage of this unseen, unique, hidden gem right in plain sight and do what it can to preserve and celebrate our ridge and the town that resides along it. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Joe.
Appreciate it.
Well, that's a tough act to follow, Linda McNamara.
I'm going to pass it
You
this
don't
time.
want to follow that act.
No, it was good.
I'm with you. But I'll bet you Karen Anderson has no problems following that.
No, I'm upset.
All right, just put that on Derek. Derek, no. Bonnie?
No, thank you. I'll pass.
Joe?
Hey,
You should have just dropped the mic. Robert Ryan.
I'll defer to the next lady behind me.
Well, the next lady is my cousin. You ready, Judy?
Yes, although you've said everything.
Right?
I totally agree with Joe. I'm Judy Zakiri.
Oh, we gotta wait till you get up there, Judy, so we can hear you.
Okay. I'm Kay Judy Zakiri, and I live at 985 Cane Patch. And I agree wholeheartedly with Joe, and I want to find out which house is the Sears Roebuck. And the schoolhouse from 1861 still has a bell on the side.
can you get closer to the microphone, please?
Oh dear.
Hold it down.
Is this okay? Is this any better?
Great.
Well, I agree with Joe, if we haven't heard that. I want to conserve the history of it also. I love it. I envision my grandmother, who was born on Slocum Road during the Civil War. She went to a women's seminary down by State and Maine in Rochester. And I kind of like to think of her on horse, and with a horse and buggy, I guess. It must have been almost 80 in the 80s on Ridge Road. So I don't really want to see any more commercial development. I would like it to stay as interesting and historical as it is. I love it. I walk the road when the weather's good daily in my pink jacket. I wore my pink jacket because I thought maybe somebody might recognize me because I walk Ridge Road. Many times I go down Cherry Hill. I feel safer on Cherry Hill. But and I always face traffic because I want to see who's going to kill me. But I walk it because I love it. I just love it. I do have a suggestion. I've noticed the zoning varies depending upon where the road, on the stretch of road. I believe from Ryan's toward 404, it has a zoning that allows for greater commercial than the zoning on the opposite, it's on the north side of the road, as the zoning on the south side of the road has. Now when you get to gravel, I could be wrong, it wouldn't be the first time, it won't be the last. I think maybe both sides of that stretch might have the more commercial zoning than residential. I'd like to see it. I'm happy with what's there, the hairdresser, picture framing. We can all live with, those are residential type industries. So I'd like that zoning just to kind of encompass that whole stretch. It's a 1.1 miles long from Bay to 404. And I'd like to keep that just kind of the way it is. It'd be nice to have the buildings rehabilitated. But I do like the commercial and the historical aspect of it. So it's the zoning that is a suggestion. And then I'd love to see the sidewalk extended from 404 to 5 miles so I could walk to my bank and Hagadorn and a few other places. I don't feel safe walking on 404 without a sidewalk. But that's beside the point. I appreciate you listening to me, and I appreciate all that you have done, Mr. Tuso. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Judy. All right, is it Louise McGee?
Yes, I guess.
You do pass, huh? All right, and then we have, hey, Lynn Barton. Lynn?
Oh, yeah, I'll just get up real quick. I wasn't going to, but.
See, that's why you signed it?
Hi, I'm Lynn Barton. I live at 50 Elm Street. And hi, Joe. We spoke on the phone. Now I can put a face to his name. I just want to say that I'm happy that you're going to hopefully protect the strippers, you know, the brick building at the Four Corners. I believe in adaptive reuse of our older structures, so I'm hoping that they can be preserved, especially the old hotel. Those don't usually survive in towns and villages, so it would be great to have a use for that, keep it around. West Webster is not an area in town that has been well documented through the years. And I know the museum did a lot of research last year and had a nice display on that area. But we're always still going to be looking for more photos, more history on the buildings. I don't know a lot about the stripper building. In the village of Webster, where I've lived my whole life, there were sewer lines put in, and they documented each property and every person that had owned it from, you know, way in the beginning. So there's more documentation that helps give the history of some of our Main Street buildings. And I don't know if sidewalks are possible in the future, but it would be nice, especially in the Four Corners area. I don't think you really have good sidewalks there. It'd be nice to add that so people could walk. Maybe it would encourage more businesses to go in. I don't know. I don't live there, so it's really important that the folks that live in that area let you know what they want done. And that's all I have.
That's great, thanks, Lynn.
Thanks, ladies.
Well, there are people here that didn't sign in and came in late. Does anybody still want to take the podium? Okay, before we go to the questions from the board to Matt, interestingly enough, I know Judy and Lynn both referenced sidewalks. We got so many things going on in this area. Matt referenced a grant we got a while back that we're working on right now. In fact, Josh, was in late October, we did an open house at Liberty Lodge. I don't know if anybody attended it, and you saw some artist renditions of the traffic pattern changes there. Correct me if I'm wrong, aren't there sidewalks in that rendition?
Yes, that is a big component of various concepts that were proposed, yes, sidewalks.
Right, and this is where it gets kind of confusing. This public hearing for this grant is about those buildings. The grant that we got awarded a year ago or so that Matt and Josh are waist deep in dealing with, that's more about traffic patterns, sidewalks, widening roads, all that stuff. They're somewhat mutually exclusive, but they certainly, strategically, we are going after both of them because, as you all know, there's a lot that's got to be done in that area. So, other than that, Bill, any questions?
No, I don't have any questions for that.
Ginny?
Thanks for your presentation and thank you everyone for being here.
Patty?
I don't have any questions. I have perhaps a little different perspective. First of all, my mother-in-law called me the other day to tell me how excited she was to read about the possible revitalization of this area. She read it in the Webster today, and she went into when she and my father-in-law built their home in the late 1950s in West Webster, and how vibrant that area was, and she was excited to see that we could be bringing it back. Secondly, my husband and I bought our first home at 477 Ridge Road, right across from the cemetery, across from Maple Drive, so I'm familiar with that area very personally. And I do know that ridge. I know what it was like to live in that house that was about 5 feet off of 404 and have the morning bus come driving by our house every day. But it is a beautiful area, and I'm excited to see this revitalization. It was a great neighborhood then. The home was built in the 1860s. Evidently, we didn't learn our lesson because then we turned around and purchased a home on Dunning Avenue that was built in 1890. We're still working on that. Lynn can appreciate it. She's right around the corner from me. So I just want to thank you for all of this, Matt. I want to thank you for spearheading it. It goes back to the tremendous success of the Economic Development Alliance. Without that partnership that we have, I don't think any of this would be possible because this is a big undertaking for a town board to take on with all of the other things that we do. So this partnership of the town, the village, the Business Improvement District, the Chamber of Commerce, and the school district are what make up the Webster Economic Development Alliance. And these are the type of projects that just enrich the entire community. So I want to thank you for your work on that.
Yeah, and Betty, I gotta say that, it's funny, Matt, I don't know if he approached the board or said to me in early November, mid-November, this opportunity came up with this Restore New York. It's a different rendition of years ago, but it's got a very short window. We have to do some quick milestones that ultimately ends up in the formal application on January 27th. This was within 3 months of the formal application. Private industry, we can make that happen. Government, that's a tough one, especially all the milestones. But Matt, we said, give it a shot, let's see what we can do. And he is really, the income survey, so critical to this as far as, you can send in a grant request for $2 million or $1.6 million, and great, hit the deadline, but if you don't put in a robust, supporting documentation of why you should award that money to West Webster, then you're not going to get awarded. And he really coached us on, if you really want to be serious about going for this and seriously be in a position to get awarded it, we got to put our money where our mouth is on some income survey, the engineering, what is it, of the structural engineering report on 600 Ridge to see if it was even something that could be renovated. I gotta tell you, I think after this, Matt, and I know you're probably a little bummed that the 2 other property owners that you referenced have not responded to you, but you've done a great job on this and put us in a position on January 27th where we can apply, so thank you. Charlie, you got anything to say from a legal perspective on this?
No, I mean, we've been dealing with this legally for
Yeah.
a decade.
Holy cow. Yeah. Well, if there's nothing else to be said, I think that's it for the public hearing, and we'll move on from here for some housekeeping cleanup things, and we'll apply on the 27th, keep everybody apprised of if we get the money, and like Matt said, the town's just a pass-through. Those private owners have to be the ones that execute the strategy. So, with that being said, closing the public hearing. I hope our audience is relieved, and I thought you'd stick around for some of these are fun presentations here. Well, Paul,
Thank you all.
yes, thank you. You can stay, yes, please do. Because I gotta tell you, actually all 3 of them.
Eric?
All 3 of them are pretty.
Where's the guitar?
Paul, everything's filing out. You didn't see any response from Dennis Clough today, right?
No, I did not.
All right, well, let it go. I was hoping we might be able to give some color to that.
Yeah.
It is what it is. Yep.
Hey, this, Tom just thought it would be a good idea when we revisit the ARPA funds to see where we're currently at and have some discussion in regard to spending the portion we designated for government services. Alright, so I'd just like give you a little summary of what we've been through. We received the first check from ARPA back in July of 21. It was a little over $2 million. The second check came in about a year later, at the end of July 22. It was also a little bit over $2 million. The feds actually passed the final rule in January of 2022, which 1st of '22. There are basically several primary ways that funding can be utilized for public health, to combat the economic impact of COVID, funding for the town loss of revenue, premium pay for essential workers, and water, sewer, broadband infrastructure. Several months ago, we designated, the town board passed a resolution to designate $350,000 toward our grant program. We had many applicants apply, and we ended up approving 14 grant applications and paid out $350,000 in July of '22 to those grantees. The board had also decided to designate $2.5 million to the wastewater treatment plant Phase 2 project, which is, the construction's not underway, but the planning and design is well underway. So to date, we've spent $1,518,361 on these earmarked funds for that purpose. The board had also designated $1,260,000 as replacement of lost public sector revenue, which means that we can use that for government services. So there's significant flexibility in how this money can be spent, and that's basically going to be the topic of our discussion tonight. So the uses of that money can be for road building, maintenance, and other infrastructure, health services, general admin staff and administrative facilities, environmental remediation, which kind of ties into the Webster Hamlet presentation that Matt just did, with the furniture stripper building, and police public safety services. So some of the possible uses for our town might be to modernize IT, hardware, software, and cybersecurity. It can be used for highway infrastructure, which could be building roads, maintaining roads, and I think it could be used for the highway building as well. So it mentions highway infrastructure, but that was a little gray to me. It can also be used for police technical equipment and vehicles. I was thinking it could be used for the town comprehensive plan, which we just got a grant for, and as I mentioned, possibly for the West Webster Hamlet as well. So just to summarize the funding, so the total amount received is $4,050,860. We designated $350,000 for grants, $2.5 million for the wastewater treatment plant project, and the remaining $1,200,860 for government services. So the total spent to date is $1,816,361, which means about $2.2 million remains at this point. So there's a timeline for the use of the funds. The funds need to be eligible expenses must be incurred before 12/31/24. So the funds must be obligated, but you have until the end of 2026 to actually complete the projects that you designated for the use of these funds. So in regards to the 2024 date, I guess we should get moving just to decide how the remaining funds will be spent, get a better idea. So, and just a reminder, the reporting requirements is an annual reporting requirement. We complied by the end of April. And April of each year we have to file a report. And if we spend over $750,000 a year, it's subject to a special single audit, which is an additional, it's more of a compliance audit than a financial audit. And it would be performed by our CPA firm. That's about it. So I think we wanted to speak about where we go from here.
Yeah, and just to start the conversation, one of the reasons, the main reason, and I think Patty, you might have put the bug in my ear a couple of weeks ago, that we should come to a workshop and have Paul give us an update on this. And I think you did.
I did.
Okay, thank you. I'm starting to lose my memory on things, so. I shouldn't say that out loud, should I? Someone hopefully I'll forget what I said. And what really spawned that, I think, was that without the town board, the town board and Paul has done a good job of the three major categories that you just said. We started to kind of fall into this, it's an unintended thing where we've taken the $1.2 million for general government, and over the last few months we said, well, let's use $22,000 for the environmental phase 2 testing on 600 Ridge. Let's use $100,000 to buy the sidewalk plow. So it's funny where Paul has just said that we've spent to date $1.8 million. We've actually got another 120 some odd thousand that is obligated when the invoices come in.
We do.
And so before that train leaves the station too far and we start just sitting around the next few months and saying, hey, why don't we use it for this and this as it reactively comes up, we thought that this was a good start. We're not going to solve anything tonight, but at least start the discussion of maybe coming up with a schedule of things that we would use this money for, this $1.2 million, which is now down to, I don't know, $1.080 million.
Yeah.
So there's my prelude to this. And then I'll let the other board members let her rip.
No, I had just mentioned that we take a look at this as a whole picture so that obviously the things that we talked about, the environmental testing and the sidewalk, these are certainly needs, but I wanted to be sure we weren't losing sight over perhaps applying these funds to some larger meaningful projects that need to be done, but we may not have the means to do within the budget. So I'm glad that we're looking at it. And where we go from there, I think we'll be discussing it. I just want to be careful that we're not spending it a little bit at a time and then moving on.
Ginny or Bill on this?
Well, if we can use it for infrastructure, I'm sure that the new building and work at the highway garage, there's quite a bit of infrastructure that has to be done there. And we could use some of that money for that, and that would be help on the other end of the bonding.
Yeah.
We have a meeting tomorrow morning for a preliminary estimate of the cost of everything. So I'll have a better idea of what cost to the infrastructure work will be. Hopefully.
Bill, I'm glad you brought this up because as Paul showed in here, we got a lot of latitude on this as far as, what is it, the end of 24 is when we have to, that's the final double secret probation date of when you are saying this is what you're using the money for.
Yeah.
Now I want to ask, this isn't a gotcha question, Paul. We got $2.5 million slotted for the wastewater plant. I want to know, and I think I know the answer to this, as we go along over the next 2 years leading up to the end of 24, if we all of a sudden hit pay dirt on all these grants for the wastewater plant, could we repurpose that $2.5 million ARPA?
I believe we can.
That's what I thought. And to that extent, what Bill just said, I just want our options left open because, Bill, you might have hit the nail on the head. We may find as time goes on that we need the money for the highway facility, more so than sewer. And if the clarification, like you said, the ambiguous about highway that you said, if we get confirmation on that, well, it'd be nice to have that option open. So, but I just, I guess, like I said, we're not going to solve anything tonight, but I'm going to just make a proposal that before this board approves another resolution for 10 grand here or 20 grand there, that we first have some semblance of a proposed plan beyond just the three major categories.
Pecking order.
Yes. And I don't know, Paul and I we'll keep on this because, the end of 24, I know it sounds like it'll come quicker than we think.
Yeah.
It's January 23, so, if we come back and to a workshop and say, a couple months and say, hey, here's an idea for how we know the 350's gone. That went to 14 different 501c3s. So we're really at the 2.5 million that right now we have earmarked for wastewater. And then $1.2 million for general, which, you know, whatever. Well, I know we got 22 grand earmarked for the phase 2 on 600 Ridge, and about 100 for that sidewalk lot.
Right.
Other than that, in my mind, nothing is, right now, initially we slotted up 2.5 for the wastewater plant. I'm not married to that, because I want to see how we make out with WIA and some of these other grants that we could go for. And if we find that we're just knocking it out of the ballpark on the wastewater, I want that money to be considered by this board for other needs, like Bill just said. Because just the way it is, there might be more grant opportunities for wastewater than there is for highway.
I will tell you right now, we have no opportunities for grants for highway. We've already gone over that, and will be presented that information at the next meeting.
Are you trying to make me cry?
No, I'm just giving you the facts.
Jenny, you want to follow that one?
Well, I'm glad, you know, that our company have shared with the nonprofit organization that we have them, you know, in that. I'm happy to see that, and I thank you all for a lot of your time and your effort, you know, to break down everything and help, you know, with this grant. So, like I said, whatever best for our community, you know, we use the money for, I will support it, because that's all this goal, you know, to help our community.
Anything else? All thanks.
You're welcome.
All right.
All.
Well, next up, our second of 3 presentations and discussions. Oh, she is. You were hiding behind the beam. I was like, is she here yet? Donna Komar, our esteemed town assessor, will present. This is actually her follow-up to a September presentation to this board, right, Donna? When you first introduced the income limits for seniors and disabilities, and here we are in January for where we're at on those. I'll hand the baton to you, Donna.
Okay, so I was here back in September to discuss the limitations on income for 2 of our popular exemptions, for limited income senior citizen and disabled persons with limited incomes. So a brief overview of what we did in September, and I put a link here for our viewers at home, and you find this online. There's a link there that should take you to the previous, it should take you to it should take you to the previous presentation that I did. Some of these slides will look familiar to you, just to refresh you. We looked at a local option to adjust the income limits for these 2 exemptions. And what we did is we reviewed what those basic qualifications were for each of those exemptions. We talked about the town board's authority to set the income limitation for the town purposes within the limitations that are set by the statute. And we discussed the statistics from the 2022 assessment roll, and we revealed what the Census Bureau talks about, Webster's demographics, so that you would know our community from population and financial level. Additionally, we discussed the effects of the increase in the income limit and the difficulty of predicting that impact on the taxable value and ultimately on the tax rate for the town. I would remind you that it requires a separate and distinct public hearing for each of the exemptions if you wish to make any alterations to either of the exemptions. And that's kind of a speedy fast forward right up to while we're here, we have the opportunity and the objective is to set the income limit for the 50% level of benefit. And the statute says that can be between $3,000 and $50,000. That's a new higher limit. We are currently as a town at $26,000 for our 50% mark. Past that, the statute will set forth certain steps in place to do a graduated as the income goes up slightly up to the total maximum. And you don't get to set those, they are already set. You set the 50%. So your options for the 2023 assessment roll is that by March 1st of 2023, you can do nothing and the exemption would remain in place as it has been since 2010. You could lower the town income limit level for 50%. You could raise it up to the 50% benefit that's currently there at 50,000 or anything in between. And if you do nothing, please remember that you can revisit this question in future years. If you go partially towards the ceiling now, you can revisit again in future years. This is not a one-time decision and then you'll be done until the state takes its next move, unless you go to the maximum. And by way of reminder, this is the scale as it plays out by that statute of the benchmarks between the 50%, 45%, and 45 to 40% marks. We're currently at 26,000 for our maximum 50. And our top end at the 5% discount is 34,400. This is income of each individual applicant's household that we're talking about for anyone who missed those basic qualifications the last time around. The new statewide maximum would begin for 50% at 50,000 and go all the way to the top of a 5% discount for those who are making 58,400 in their household. Here's the news flash and why I'm here today. There are 5 deciding tax jurisdictions that are found in the town of Webster assessment roll. Monroe County obviously encompasses all of our town, and as of January 10th this week, they adopted the new state maximum. Their scale will be the 50,000 to 58,400, and we'll be approving applications for county tax purposes on that level. Webster Central School Districts earlier this week confirmed with me by email that they plan to take no action at this point for this coming roll year. They are going to leave their limits exactly as they have been in the past. We will reconsider that on a future year. Town of Webster is pending, the village of Webster is pending, and Wayne Central School District is our 5th jurisdiction. They have 44 parcels. I'm not following that one quite as closely. I also decided to do an informal survey from the assessors. Here's a list of all the towns in Monroe County, and you can see 2 of them plan to go according to assessor conversation. This is an informal assessor survey. 2 of them say that their towns and municipalities are planning to go to the new state maximum. For the most part, you can see the number of check boxes here in the middle column. Most towns are not changing at this time. City of Rochester is rumored to be anticipating the new maximum along with the county, and the county actually did adopt it this week, as I said. So there's a few towns I wasn't able to connect with recently, but that's what our neighbors are doing in Monroe County. So the timeline for taking action for the 2023 assessment roll is that you would have had to make a decision by March 1st deadline. Today is January 12th. We have 6 meetings between now and then. And with the assistance of the town clerk, we've identified 2 paths of 2 sets of dates that will get us approved by the deadline if there is a change that the town board wishes to make. If you do not wish to make any change, no action or public hearing is required. We'll just continue as we have been. So the dates, as you can see, are there on the screen. You will either follow the yellow path or the green path to your desired destination. And then incidentally, speaking of notices, as my mom says, speaking of pianos when she wants to change the topic, but this isn't really a change of topic. In addition to all of the topics going on right now with the increased limits for both the limited income senior citizens and the limited income persons with disabilities, there is some brand new legislation hot off the press the end of December that the governor signed that says that we need to do an annual mailing. We, being all municipalities, must do an annual mailing to all residential properties to repeat a notice that is found in the bottom of their tax bills already. I'm sure there's some reasoning for that. I'm not privy to what that is, but it must be mailed separately from the tax bills.
Question.
Yes.
The
funds for municipalities to send out these postcards, right?
Unfortunately, this legislation does not include any funds to the municipalities.
I'm shocked.
The statute actually reads very simply, as you see here at the bottom of the screen, but most assessors find that all that's going to do is make their phones ring because it doesn't tell anybody anything. So it does alert people to the fact that there is such an exemption. It is already on the bottom of tax bills or on the back side of tax bills or inserted with the tax bills depending on how long your county tax bills are across the state. So what we propose is what I'm proposing to you, and I need to come to you because it is, as Attorney Genesi pointed out, an unfunded mandate, which is surprising us after the budget is already set. Therefore, I do not have the postage in my budget to send out the postcards that the new law is going to require. I can budget for that in the future, and perhaps we can get a little creative about how we can do this more economically. But right now, we've been given 30-day notice to mail out 14,920 notices. At 49 cents is one of the options that I have for a postcard. And we would put a little more information in here, as you can see on the sample postcard from one of the vendors that I was contacting. The best I can do is $7,311. It's great to notify the community. We have the website. We do put publications out. It is on the bottom of every tax bill. This is affectionately called the second notice, but it's really, if you're in the village, it's your fourth notice, and if you're in the town, it's your third notice, right? Because you get it, everyone gets a school bill, everyone gets a town and county bill, people in the village will get that bill, and then you would get this notice in addition to it. It doesn't allow us to exclude the people already getting the program, and it does not allow us to exclude people that we might know are under age 65. I don't know how my records could determine that, but we're mailing them to all residential properties. They may not be owner occupied. I can't determine that from our records, just all residential properties. Plus 14,920 mailings this year and more next year, every year. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Supervisor Flair and I are trying to find the best price that we can afford at the last minute. The one that you see on the screen in front of you, I would need to give them notice by tomorrow in order for them to get these printed. They've designed this postcard for anyone who is currently using their services to print our tax bills. That was the company, the vendor we met with here, and that's the price of 49 cents. So I would just suggest that people watch their mailbox for the final format, because something is coming to a house near you. And it will be there by first part of February for sure, because the statute also is so limited that if we follow the exact letter of this statute, and hopefully it will change with some conversation among assessors with the governor's office over the course of the year before next year comes back, but we have to mail it on January 30th. There's no window of opportunity, so maybe we move our Webster Today mailing to January 30th and we put it in there or something, but there's not a window of time. They want it 30 days before the application deadline.
Not this year. Yeah.
Yeah, this year it's too late because we didn't know in time to put it into the Webster Today or move that mailing date back. And those are the types of conversations we're trying to have and thinking we're trying to do in order to just come up with a way that is more economically feasible and fiscally responsible for our taxpayers, because the 20-somethings are going to get this notice. And if they have parents that they're taking care of, I think then that's a really good notice for them to have. There are people who need assistance of their adult children. So I don't entirely scoff at that, but at the same time, we know from the demographics from the Census Bureau, 20% of our population, round numbers, are senior citizens. Not all of them own homes. So when you own a business and you're going to send out a mailing, you're looking at an 80% plus miss to the demographic you're trying to reach. But we will respect the laws that are before us, and we will work on proper channels to see what we can do to amend them in the future to make it fiscally responsible.
Donna, since you and I have met a couple times in this, I know I missed it the first time. Without being disparaging to the lawmakers Attorney Jeanette. I assumed, and you know what happens when you assume, and Donna first showed me this, that we had up until January 30th to send this mailer out. He corrected me in the second meeting and said, no, it has to be postmarked on January 30th. Is that correct?
To be mailed 30 days prior to the deadline.
And your
The deadline is
assessors
March
were-
1st, there's 28 days in February this year, so that brings us to January 30th.
That's pretty specific, thank you.
And
Thank you.
there
I was
must be a
thinking
reason
about
for
that.
that
It's, you know,
specification.
yeah.
I think that it is intentional to put it between the mailing of the tax bill and the deadline.
Yeah.
What it's also going to do is, it's sort of an 11th hour when you're talking about a town of this size and other large towns. I know that my colleagues who have large towns are also facing similar situations. The talk that this was a possibility at the September conference, after the last time I was here, it was brought up at a conference for New York State Assessors Association conference. We were talking about it, and some of the people downstate were saying $250,000 in postage for the sites of their towns, unfunded, unbudgeted. It's a difficult pill for all municipalities to swallow, that every homeowner now across the state is going to receive this notice, and they're already receiving that notice. And there's other ways to reach our public these days. So our associations will do the proper due diligence. We'll see how important it becomes to the governor's office. I'm sure there's bigger fish to fry. But for us, this is significant expense. If it were the only notice, it would have a different impact, I think.
So, yeah.
Okay, so that's the end, and this is my screen to leave up there to say if you'd like more information on exemptions in general, remember that you need to apply by March 1st, which is a Wednesday this year, which is when we are setting the date for the town board on the issue of changing the income limits. February 23rd is the last day you could possibly vote on that public hearing if you choose to hold one. Is there any questions I can answer for the board?
Not that I'm suggesting the town do this, I'm just curious. In any of the jurisdictions or municipalities opted for one and not for the other?
No, usually we find that the two will agree, because you're looking at your demographics. We have so few exemption applications for limited income disabled persons that it doesn't have the same impact against the tax rate that the senior citizens community does.
Charlie, were you saying like the school district
No.
town, or you saying like
I think one has one, that's the other.
Oh, senior versus disabled. Interesting, okay, I misunderstood.
Just curious.
And okay, well, you know what, I don't want to jump ahead. Jenny, do you have any questions?
Thanks, Evan.
Bill?
No. It's just interesting that the state figures that every town, municipality can come up with extra money out of a budget that had already been approved.
I have my wallet here, Bill.
Apparently, it's just, anyway, that's our governor.
Okay. Betty?
No, I just said if the state wants every person in the state to get this mailing, they should send it out.
Well, and I gotta say that when Donna and I have met a couple times in this last week, I was a little concerned that maybe the incidentally part of her presentation might throw us off because it's the last thing we saw. And it is very aggravating, this unfunded and whatever. And, you know, I've said to Donna, we're gonna try to figure out how to turn lemon into lemonade on this one. But I don't want the board to lose sight of the fact that this presentation is the follow-up to the one she did in September, where it was like, that screen right there to me is the most important one. Well, second, because the survey you did spoke volumes to me. That survey spoke volumes, as did the school districts answer about, we, in more words or less than paraphrasing, we want to see what the financial effect is for the county going to the max. Because it is almost impossible to calculate what giving that additional exemption to senior citizens means to what it does to the tax rate of the rest of the citizens. And that really resonated with me, and I will say this. When you look at the yellow brick road and the green brick road or whatever that you showed of public hearings and all that, for us to meet this, if we want to change what we're currently at, I'm going to tell you something, that's a heavy lift, because this board would have to have by the 2nd or the 9th, what is our proposed change? Is it going to the max? Is it somewhere in the middle? And for my money, no pun intended, and I know we're not voting on a resolution here today, I think that we should stand pat and see what happens, like the school district is with the county, to see what kind of effect. Because I think Webster, and this is both a blessing and a curse, we have a large population of senior citizens that still own their own homes. So if we did this and went to the max, this isn't cutting taxes to our citizens. This means we're redistributing our taxes to potentially 35-year-old single working families who make $55,000 a year, have a mortgage, who really could have used that exemption more than the 65-year-old that's house is free and clear, but is under the income limit. That's an unintended consequence, isn't it? There's too much that I don't understand. For my money, and I think we should stand pat. And I don't know. That's how I feel about it. But I also understand that the board's like, no, we gotta figure out by the 2nd or the 9th, and we gotta follow that schedule. And we gotta do something.
Do we need to take a vote or a resolution?
No.
If we do nothing, we just do nothing?
We do nothing.
I'm really not in favor of changing this at this point. I'll just say that, so that, people don't think, well, we're just sweeping under the carpet, forgetting about it. I think we should leave it as it is, and we can revisit it. And I think Donna made a very good point when she presented in September, as you just reiterated. There are households that is their income, and they wouldn't qualify for this because they're not disabled or senior. I agree with you, Supervisor.
But and we'll get data in a year.
Right.
And not for nothing. And like I said, I don't want to jump on the bandwagon of disparaging the state government and all that. Come on, this is a downstate initiative. This is a downstate initiative, right?
Yes.
Because with the houses and all that stuff down there, you can't live in the 5 boroughs in Long Island at $58,000 a year. That's a different area than Monroe County. And unfortunately, we get broad brushed in state laws, right, Attorney Jesse?
Right.
I don't know.
Just another piece of feel-good legislation that looks good on the surface. I don't know how little thought was given to it. My 2
I
cents.
can't explain how they came up to the numbers, but I can tell you the other piece that I talked to you about was the increase in inflation since 2010, which is the last time that you considered an income change. Okay, so I'm not advocating one side or the other, but to make sure that you have both sides represented, the last time you made a change to the income stream for this for town purposes was 2010. That was the last time the state put a new maximum out as well. So it's been a long time since anybody has been able to consider it. At that time, the town did not go to the state maximum, so you're still sitting below the former state maximum. And I did a little study for you of the inflation rate and what it has accumulated over time. And I do believe that that has one factor of the attrition of the number of applications on our roll. So I say all that to preface your comment, Mr. Supervisor, about we'll have data next year. Let me enlighten what that would mean. Because you are positioned that the county has already gone to, because the county has already gone to the state's new maximum. Had they picked any other number, you'd still have speculations in front of you. But they have picked the state maximum, and they've picked that to be in effect immediately. That means at this time next year, actually by July, I can tell you the impact of at least some people becoming aware of that, because I'm sure now it will be advertised. We've already begun to answer the questions. We were knowing that this was what they were considering. We already, a month ago, started answering questions coming to us. Well, the state maximum is 58.4. Why don't you apply if you think you're under that? We can always deny you if they approve a lesser number. So we're taking in those applications. It'll take a little while for everyone to become aware of the program, but at least you will have an indication of the shift in the value, of the taxable value, or shall I say, an increase in the exempt value by the new applications and by the new look at the old applications on a different scale. So all we'll have to do is look at what the county level of approval is for an exemption value. And we can just ask our finance director to crunch some numbers for us and say, what does that do to our tax rate? And what does that do? Because when you can see what it does to the tax rate, then you know the impact to the non-senior community. Because as I said in September 8th, it's a zero-sum game. The town will never lose money. We're just going to collect the same amount of money from a different part of the tax base. Even the people who would enjoy this benefit must pay on the part that's not benefited a higher tax rate to afford the benefit.
Wow,
Does that make
I
sense?
got it, yes it does.
So that's my Reader's Digest version without crunching numbers to you. And I'm saying that, you've never heard me say that about exemptions before, but this is a very significant increase. And I think that it's very prudent for you to have a certain amount of caution about the decision. And as you said, you will have data next year. You can crunch that out and say, no, but I think we certainly can offer benefit on this level now that we know what the worst case scenario, the highest level, I'm sorry, worst case scenario is a bad phrase, the highest level, what that would bring on the largest impact to the tax base.
Well, this is actually almost a 100% increase
From where we are now.
No, from the, you know,
Yes.
I mean, I don't think there's 100% inflation. I mean, I realize there's inflation, but there certainly isn't 100% cost of living increase in the last 12 years.
Correct, and the inflation study that I did last time for viewers who want to go back and take a look at the previous presentation, I don't remember that, I didn't bring that with me, but there was an inflation rate that we calculated, and this puts it a few years out in advance of that. I know that the Social Security cost of living increase to the Social Security that senior citizens are going to receive is over 8% in 2023. That's a really large jump. And that 8% alone, if you change nothing, is going to cause some of the people who are teetering around 5% to leave the program altogether. So that has been going on. I think it's good to look at it. I think it's good to have data to make a wise and prudent decision.
Look, obviously, if somebody's not watching this meeting or doesn't see the transcripts or whatever, they could go, oh my God, the town board doesn't care about people with disabilities or senior citizens. That's an easy narrative to throw out there, okay? But the reality is we're elected, and our fiduciary responsibility is all the citizens, and we'll have the data. So 1 year, you're talking about the town tax bill essentially for 2024 won't have this. But by the time you can come back with data for what it did to the county going to the 100%, at least in Webster, and how many more applications, did everybody get it? Because it does make sense what she said. We'll be able to at least put our town numbers in there, how much taxable assessed value and equalization rate, all that, what it means. That now, well, I want to make sure I point to somebody who's not in the senior exemption, so, what is 65?
65.
Okay, so my house, all right, I'll be 58 in a couple months, all right? would that have affected me and all the other people under 65 that own houses here by increasing their tax rate 10 cents per thousand? We don't know.
You don't know. You don't know. And your other choice is to take some step forward, and you always have that choice. This is the new state maximum. You can be anywhere between where you are and the new state maximum. So maybe after you discuss this, and then you see the data coming in July from what new applications, how that has affected the exemption value for the county, apply that to the town and say, let's take steps to get there, but not do it all at once. Work that into the budget over a number of years if you feel that that's a place to be.
So I don't want to, we don't have to, we don't have to do any resolution. We all decide that, and there's 4 out of 5 of us here, so if 3 of us say, yeah, it just doesn't make any sense to do anything right now. I do want to make sure, and I want to turn lemons into lemonade, and that's why this thing we have to send out on the 30th. I want to get our story out there of why we're holding firm, or holding pat right now. You know what I mean? Instead of having us being reactive to the narrative that could get out there that this town board doesn't, have any feelings for our seniors and disabled, which is not the case. That's where I think we can turn lemons into lemonade if we do this intelligently and get the governor's message, the 2 sentences out there. But since it's got to go to 14,000 houses, of which we know that 80% of them aren't 65 years old, which is whatever, it's messaging and it's communicating with the citizens. So at least they think twice if they hear a narrative that, wow, I can't believe it. The county went to 100%. They respect seniors and disabled. The town board doesn't. That's not true.
Well, that isn't the message. They won't receive that message certainly from our office, but we will publish the 58,400 because it's now an official limitation. It's only the limitation we can look at for the purposes of the county tax lines on their bills. So when people give us that application, we look at it once for county purposes, once for town purposes, once for the village, once for the school district that they're in, right? Behind the scenes, the computer actually does that for us, but when we're trying to explain it to them, they have one income, but they can walk away with multiple levels of benefit depending on the jurisdiction's decision exactly for this purpose. So I've taken more than my time.
That's okay. You know what? I mean, look, sorry, Jim, we're starting late, but also this extra time, and it's good discussion because it actually will save us hours of, in February, what you just showed we'd have to do on public hearings and all that. If the board, at least the 4 people here, they've heard enough, they're like, yeah, probably the town should stand pat, and we don't have to start configuring one of those yellow pass or green pass. You good with that, Bill?
No, I'm fine. We need a lot more data than we have to understand implications.
Jenny? You're good with us standing pat for now, like the school district did?
I agree, but can I put in 2 cents instead?
Sure.
Of stamps? We tried the meter stamps, would that be cheaper?
Oh, that's all
That is.
bulk and Disha
all-
and whatever, and that's a,
Yeah, it
let's
is.
not go down
And
this
it's
rabbit hole.
postcard instead of envelope,
Yeah.
and it's outsourced so that we don't have to purchase directly the supplies and put the labor into that. Paying our people.
Yeah.
They have machines that will do it, it's much faster.
We're still gonna do some pricing actions on that, because we might, yeah.
So I'll see.
Anyway. We all good on this one?
Thank you.
Donna, thank you.
Thank you, Donna.
Thank you.
Very thorough.
Appreciate it.
Bill, you should run for governor
I'm done.
next. Hey, you and Charlie as your attorney general.
This next one.
All right, well, guess what? We're down to our last item of the night, and it's a presentation by Jim Montgomery on the concept of a residential refuse collection zone in Webster's. So Jim and Josh, I'm going to hand the time to you guys on this one.
So we started tonight by talking about the hidden gems of Webster, and now we're going to talk about the garbage of Webster. So we're going to be talking about residential refuse collection zones, or the concept that you said, Mr. Supervisor. So we're going to jump over this. What is a residential refuse collection zone? It's a mouthful, and I wanted to start by saying that we are not proposing to get into the garbage collection business. I think the last time I was before the board, this had come up during the property maintenance presentation, and it is not something we want to do. We're not like the city. We're not proposing to start collecting garbage. A residential refuse collection zone is a zone or defined area within the town that's created and enforced jointly by the highway superintendent and code enforcement. Zones are assigned specific days of the week that refuse haulers may collect refuse, and this is residential only. It's important to note that as well. This is not for our commercial properties. All zones would be displayed on a master refuse collection zone map, and this map would be made available to both residents of the town and the refuse hauler. Haulers are made aware of all zones in which days they are permitted to collect from each one. Information is also provided to the haulers upon application of refuse haulers permit from our town clerk when they come to get that. And what would the benefits of these be? I'm going to go over 4 of them, but as Dolly, our town clerk, is very aware, and I'm sure Mr. Supervisor, you're very aware, you get a lot of calls about this. We have a lot of problems in the town right now with collection of refuse and how things are getting switched up day to day. People don't know when the refuse is coming. And my office gets at least 1 call a week regarding that, and I think that this is going to help with that, with just some kind of regulation. But anyway, first, visual blight. Limiting the number of days that refuse haulers can pick up on any given street means that refuse containers will only be stored at the curb on these specific days, as opposed to containers littering the curb all week long. Blowing refuse, because refuse containers will only be stored at the curb a few days per week, the chances of loose refuse being blown throughout the neighborhood is greatly decreased. Residential noise, garbage trucks are loud, we all know that. These vehicles will not only travel down any given street or neighborhood 1 to 2 times per week. And then residential traffic, due to their large size, garbage trucks traveling in neighborhoods and on major roadways often congest traffic, and while they're performing their work, and this will now be limited throughout the town as well. So we're not reinventing the wheel here. This is something that's actually done in other municipalities, one of them being the town of Greece. The village also does something similar. They allow refuse to be picked up Monday through Wednesday. So they're so small that it would just be 1 zone, I guess you could say. The town of Greece, though, currently administers and has written into their town code what they call the residential solid waste collection areas. There are a total of 7 zones or areas, each having specific days that you can see on the map that refuse haulers are allowed to collect from. The enforcement of this is done proactively by the Commissioner of Public Works, which is the most equivalent to our highway superintendent, who provides this information to the haulers when the wheeler permit is issued. And it's enforced by both DPW, their Department of Public Works, and code enforcement by observing violations of these applications. The applicable town codes and reacting accordingly. I spoke to the superintendent or the Commissioner of Public Works in Greece, and they are very fond of this model. I guess we can do a little story time, and I'll read you what their code says quickly. A town board authorization upon recommendation of the Commissioner of Public Works, the town board is authorized from time to time by resolution to determine this and establish residential solid waste and recycling collection areas and the days of the week within which the residential solid waste and recycling collection business may operate within those residential solid waste and recycling collection areas. Each such area will have collection occur at a minimum of 2 days per week. Such resolution shall approve a map setting forth the residential solid waste and recycling collection areas on these days of the week within which the residential solid waste and recycling collection business may operate within those residential solid waste recycling collection areas. And then D of that same code section says the additional residential solid waste and recycling collection area designation, all residential solid waste and recycling areas of collection, and allowed days of the week for the collection shall remain in full force in effect unless subsequently modified by the resident. So essentially what this is saying is that refuse haulers can operate during these days of these zones, and they cannot operate otherwise. So how do we start this process? Josh and I guess, oversimplified what we believe the way to get started is, and we would draft the applicable code sections into our ordinances. We would configure the proposed zones and boundaries, which we would need help from the highway commissioner, which we've already actually sat down with him and gone over a couple different options. We would then present that to the town board and hold a public hearing. We would revise the refuse hauler permit application with our town clerk, and we would notify refuse haulers of these changes. Future benefits, that's really, I think, where this is going to stand out. So, pollution reduction. A switch to a refuse collection zone model with the annual equipment inspection requirement would reduce carbon emissions from truck exhaust, prevent leaking of harmful fluids on town roads, which runs into town storm drains and pollutes town soils. When I spoke to our highway commissioner, he did say that he does receive a number of these calls every year where refuse haulers, their hydraulics lines will break during their run, and the hydraulic fluid goes onto the road, and a resident will call and say, there's hydraulic fluid all over the street, and then our highway department has to go out and clean that up. What these inspections would do essentially is it would make the refuse hauler company go to the town, to the highway department, and have their vehicles inspected annually by our staff. Also with that, I talked to the highway superintendent, like I said, and he said that he would ensure that there was hazardous waste spill kits on board these vehicles as well. And then this one also is very important. We want to increase the standards for our residents. So increasing regulations of refuse haulers within the town of Webster will raise the standard of refuse collection companies and provide residents with a higher level of service and reliability that they deserve from these private companies. Like I said, we're having an issue right now. It doesn't matter which company it is, but we're having issues with companies with their services being provided to our residents, and we take that very seriously. And with that, I can take any questions from the board.
You realize by doing this function, cost will increase down the road.
I don't realize that, but that's good to hear.
Because of the regulations you're gonna put on these waste haulers, by only being able to go on a street, they're gonna require more vehicles to operate the business. So that means there's a cost increase to them to work in the town of Webster.
So my rebuttal to that would be, we would actually be looking at, we actually already collect how many vehicles each refuse hauler has, and we would operate our zones or try to have enough zones so that it wouldn't be the case.
Okay, you didn't say that.
You're right, I didn't.
And that might be my fault, as I said to Jim and Josh. Can you really truncate down this presentation, because it's an introduction of something that heretofore hasn't, well, I don't think it's been talked about. And within truncating it down, one of the things that Jim said in here, or didn't say, but I would like to do if we do venture off on this, here's how, on the initial steps at the end, he has notified refuse haulers of the changes. I would like to, somewhere in this process, talk to the refuse haulers. To find out, Bill, what you just said. I don't want unintended consequences as we leave the station in such a process. Anywhere along those initial steps, when you can, present to the town board, if whatever, you got to set a public hearing. Maybe people will come in here and scream bloody murder. We're not going to have something like that. You really want to flush out, no pun intended, all unintended consequences. I don't want something where all of a sudden the average cost quarterly, I think that's how I get billed, goes from, don't quote me on this number, $50 to $100, because the town basically became an over-regulatory place. We're more talking about the fact, and I've been getting these complaints too, some of these streets have garbage haulers going up and down them Monday through Saturday. That stinks, no pun intended. I mean, that is, with our residential neighborhoods and whatever, that means you got those garbage bins and the recycle bins down at the side of the road every single day of the week.
We had Monday through Friday last year.
I don't think that that's an unintended consequence of where we're at now. So, and when this went up on, Bill, when we put this up on the agenda, I got reached out to by 4 or 5 people, some of them were the usual suspects that you would know, who said, you're gonna get into the garbage business, we're gonna get rid of private. I'm like, no, I have no desire to ever even talk about that. We are trying to figure out a way to not have a street have garbage haulers on it 6 days a week. So this seems to be the easiest way, and there is a precedent. Now, Jim, like you said, the Greece government people said, we really like this model. Well, maybe because I come from private industry. That's why if we venture off it, I want to talk to who we have licensed right now. And I want to sit down with them and just, hey, I'm not doing something for the benefit of the haulers, but I also want to know if there's an unintended consequence that all of a sudden we're like, wow, for coffee with 3 or 4 people that are, the different haulers in town, I never thought about that. None of us thought about that. So we got to go back to the drawing board. Maybe this isn't a good idea. I don't want unintended consequences, and I certainly don't want this to cause increased cost. So, if I would have let you have 10 pages, you probably would have
By no means I think we're going to do this arbitrarily. There's a lot of data that we have to collect, and it really comes down to just trying to help the residents with their collection issues that they're currently having now. Because there is a lot of issues with people not having their garbage collected. And this will help because we're essentially telling the hauler, or regulating the hauler, when they can go to each zone, and it's going to allow them to have more structure to their operation.
Yeah. Didn't you say that the village, when you just said they just did something where it's now Monday through Wednesday? So is that a recent thing?
I talked to the village building inspector and code compliance person, and they told me that it is a Monday through Wednesday schedule.
It's interesting because I do live in the village, and the hauler that we were using switched it to a Thursday pickup.
So either he was incorrect or your hauler is operating on Saturday.
Well, they're not my hauler anymore.
Okay.
And that's the other thing, when we get all of these complaints, that is one of the things that people can do. If you're unhappy with your service, you can certainly switch, which we
Absolutely
did.
can.
So that's actually the first that I've heard of that in the village, so I was curious. And this has been discussed a couple of times, but it usually came from residents who wanted to bring it before us, that they were looking to limit the days of pickup and all the totes that were out on the curb all week long. But I agree with you, Supervisor, that we need to bring the haulers into the discussion too before we get too far ahead of ourselves.
And it's a finite number. How many are licensed permitted this year, Dolly? Is it 5? Yeah, so I mean, I think I can have 6 cups of coffee over a 2-week period sitting down.
Oh, I know you can.
Yeah, well, that's the problem. But, yeah, they might have a different, Jim, and I hope you didn't take that out of context. If the government in Greece likes it, well, that's only one side of it.
Correct.
Maybe it makes it easier for them. But like Bill said, that if that causes prices to go up or, whatever, well, then it's, what is it? They say the 3-legged stool. You gotta have, okay, so the government is making out on this thing, they like it. Is the citizen making out on the thing? And is the hauler making out on it? Any one of them that doesn't, the stool falls over. So, anecdotal, but that's why I want to talk to the haulers. I think the citizens I mean, we're the ones that are watchdogging for them. I can't imagine somebody saying, I want to make sure I got garbage trucks on my street 6 days a week. I can't imagine that we're going to get somebody upset and saying that's what they want. But if some semblance of this does come down the pike, and it wouldn't probably kick in until probably 24, because they've already licensed or whatever, you know. And I wouldn't want to fast track this thing either, like I said, no unintended consequences. It seems to make sense, but we don't know what we don't know.
I have no problem with it as long as it's not additional cost to the resident. That's my bottom line. The resident sees no additional cost for this, I have no issues.
Well, Bill, if I remember correctly, the board, we're all residents. So we don't want additional cost to our garbage. But, and I'm not going to say who my trash hauler is, but they've been my trash hauler for 20-some odd years. Never had a problem. When they come and they're scheduled to come on Tuesday, like clockwork, the recycle comes at 7 a.m., and I better have it down there at 7 a.m. or I'm going to miss. The garbage, the guys and gals come around, 1 to 3. And so because I'm so used to that, when I got into being supervisor and I'm getting these calls of like, my guy hasn't picked up my garbage in 3 weeks, that's unfathomable to me. Now, some of that's very specific to companies being bought and stuff like that, but the number of stories I've heard of, and right now we don't have, the citizens call us, you got to do something about that garbage company. Well, I don't really know, Dolly, if our permit licensing, has any like, what do we do? Call them and say, get out there and pick up their garbage? I don't think our permit has anything like that. There is no enforcement, I know. And that enforcement thing that's a slippery slope, Bill. You know what I mean? I'd have to see a lot more on that. But, I don't know. Maybe the haulers are all like, yeah, it's a great idea. Actually, it'll help me on my scheduling and whatever. But I want to sit down and find out if we're missing something.
It's worth more discussion.
Jenny, anything else?
Thank you.
We need more facts, we need more data to make a decision, and then to do more work. So I have no issue with my garbage, and I know when they come every Thursday, so. But I know there's issues.
Well, you should keep that carried.
Yeah.
For a lot of years, so.
Well, 7-Eleven. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jim, Josh, thank you. That concludes, I think, tonight's town board workshop. And volunteer. Hey,
By the end of the year.
We love it. My mom loved it, but we do not love it. So the worst thing that ever happened was
I will say that that's your best.
her
It's
kids
unfortunate.
that's your
Yeah, it's really too bad we lost that.